So, part 7 of my thoughts behind why academics like me might get into trouble for posting stuff like this on YouTube. The final piece of the puzzle to explain why I was asked to remove that video that I showed a clip of in part 1. In part 2, I talked about how many academics are ignorant about social media. Parts 3 and 4, sorry, I'm disturbed. That's really disturbing. I'm going to take that off. Right, let me get rid of that. Apologies. So, where was I? Parts 3 and 4 about how snobby academia can be towards the public. In part 5, I talked about how those weird hierarchies of authority can go wrong. And in part 6, I talked about the delicacies of governance and how things can slip. Now, this part is what I think is the most pernicious part of the puzzle, the corporatization of higher education. Okay, I think that worked. So I'm doing this in one take again. I won't go on about my troubles, but this is one take, so you're going to see all the mistakes. There'll be plenty. Now, so this one is all about the corporate backdraft that's blowing through the higher education sector, and it's been blowing through for some time now. I first felt its chill back in the 1980s and 1990s in the form of the student voice. From my earliest days of teaching at university, I've been an advocate for the student voice. When I started university, I was in the UK, and students didn't have much of a voice. You had no say in what you were taught and how you were taught. The best practice at the time was having student representatives on a course committee and the occasional in-house survey asking students how they felt about their studies, which no one really paid much attention to. It was a case of maybe listen, but no need to respond. In the late 1990s, higher education began shifting from elite to mass participation. And this was not opening access to higher education for the sake of it or because of issues around social justice or whatever. It was because the labour market had shifted from the use from relatively simple tasks to way more complicated tasks, because way more complicated technology was being brought into the workplace, and that demanded workers have more advanced skills. At the same time, we had occupations like nursing and social work, and among others, who were being professionalized. They needed university qualifications. University qualifications were seen as essential for these professions. So a university degree moved from being something a few people desired to being something that a lot of people needed. As university enrollments grew, the costs grew. And in the UK, but not only the UK, the government responded by shifting the financial burden from the public funding to private funding. Students were asked to pay for their education. And that shifted universities into a space where they started to function like businesses with paying customers. They started getting pulled into a free market ideology. And that was enthusiastically encouraged by the government. In England, that went so far as them trying to introduce market competition. And they did this by allowing universities to set variable fees up to a capped maximum amount. The idea was that institutions would compete for students by offering lower prices, and students would benefit as it would reduce costs. But that didn't happen. Instead, nearly every university charged the maximum amount that they could or were permitted to. Why? Well, because a cheaper degree was seen as a signal of lower quality, something that no university wanted to send out into the world saying, we're the poor quality university. They all wanted to be excellent, because they're higher, they're high education. So they all wanted to be higher, not lower. So the attempt to make or create a price-driven market completely failed. But what didn't fail was the expansion of numbers. We had more and more people going to university, and numbers expanded so much that the Competitions and Markets Authority felt that they had to step in. This is the body that makes sure competition works fairly, particularly in relation to the consumer. And the moment they stepped in, we got the strongest signal that students had shifted from being seen as students to being seen as consumers who needed to be protected. And with that, we had customer satisfaction surveying coming into the sector. The student's voice, before it really had a chance to be heard, turned into the consumer voice. And more universities were becoming reconstituted as businesses. And one of the key markers for this was the introduction of quality assurance systems. These days, we've kind of lost sense of how much of a jolt that was when it was first brought in, and how ill-fitting an idea it was. These days, quality assurance has become a moral absolute. It's impossible to argue against unless you want to be seen as someone who doesn't care about the quality of their teaching. What we've lost sight of is how the process of quality assurance was imported directly from the business world, specifically from the manufacturing sector. It's a system that's designed to catch faults in the production line before defective products reach the customers. It's designed to protect reputation and profits. And that means checking the machines are working okay, monitoring the workers to make sure they're doing their job, and when the products do reach the customer, measuring the customer's satisfaction so that you can tweak the production line and push out better products. The logic is simple. Happy customers come back, and new ones follow. It's kind of like the cornerstone of consumerism. But here's the tension. Higher education isn't a business. Academics aren't your typical workers. They have academic freedom, a level of autonomy that you rarely see in the workplace. But also, students aren't customers, because education serves broader societal goals. And qualifications aren't products, because you can't buy them. You can only earn them. But because the university sector is now seen as a business sector and students are now seen as customers, paying customers, student satisfaction surveys are seen as an important quality assurance tool, the results of which can and should be made publicly available as types of product review, where students are told which university is at the top and which is on the bottom of various league tables, constructed around the various things that they measure in these satisfaction surveys. And this gives prospective students the illusion of being able to choose the best product off the shelf. And this is one of the things that appears to sit behind why my YouTube videos became a bit of a problem. And I'll tell you about that in the final part 8, which is coming next. But here I just want to wrap this part up on the corporatization of higher education by digging just a bit deeper into the problem of relying on surveys of student satisfaction to determine the quality of our teaching. Here's a stinger. Okay, I don't have fancy sound effects for this. Me again. That was needless, wasn't it? Anyway, there it was. Now, there's one thing students, in general, appear focused on more than anything, and it's grades. It's pretty much the only question that I get asked as a tutor, as a lecturer, by students in relation to the topics I teach. Not the only question, but predominantly the question. It's the most common question. And the question is essentially, how can they get a good grade, and can I tell them clearly how to do it? Can I tell them clearly how to do the assessment in a way that they can get a good grade. And what grade they get has become seen by many students as more important than what they learn. Now, as lecturers, more and more of us have students telling us before they've submitted their assessment, sometimes before they've even seen the assessment, because the details of the assessment might not have yet been released. And certainly before they've begun working on their assessment, they tell us what grade they want or what grade they need. And most of the questions we're asked are about how to get that grade, how to do the assignment in a way that will get them that grade. And that kind of seems fair enough. But often we can't answer those questions because our job really is to ask the questions, and students' job really is to provide the answers. That's kind of how assessment works. But we now find the roles have reversed, and we have to run Q&A forums where we answer questions rather than ask the questions. And that's a problem. It's a problem when the ability to answer the question a student asks is the very thing the student is being assessed on. But now it's the thing the lecturer is being evaluated on. And students can express their dissatisfaction through those evaluations, those satisfaction surveys, when they don't get an answer or don't get a clear answer from their lecturer in regards to how to do the assessment, how to answer the questions set by the assessment. And they tell us this on the student satisfaction survey. The student's unhappy with the product, in this case the assessment task. So we need to change the product, change the assessment task. And if we change the task so that it makes it less challenging, so that students are more able to get the grades that they want and need, well, if we do that, the quality of our assessments can deteriorate. Of course, if the challenge was intended, like if we set an assessment that students find challenging and we didn't intend it to be challenging in that way, say the question was too difficult to answer because it was so poorly written, then of course we should change that. But what if the question was difficult because it was intended to be difficult? It was meant to challenge the student to think more deeply. And these student satisfaction surveys are anonymous. And that reflects that steep hierarchy that we have in higher education, with students sitting at the bottom. So they've got lots to be worried about in terms of upsetting the people at the top. And I'm not at the top, but I'm certainly higher in the authority structure than a student. So they worry about this, and they need to have their identity protected so that they can speak freely. But that means that you can't follow up to clarify from the student whether the feedback they've provided on the assessment that you've set reflects a genuine confusion because there was something wrong with the assessment, or if it reflects what we intended to be difficult, that there's intention behind us setting a task that was quite complicated and difficult to understand. And most survey comments given by students are brief, if they leave comments at all. Often with these surveys, you just get a kind of set of tick boxes on a scale of satisfaction. You know, it might be, the item might be something like, overall, I'm satisfied with my learning experience in this course. And a student ticks one of 5 boxes. So strongly disagree, neutral, agree, strongly agree. And each item is given a value, and those values are added up. And as a lecturer, you're given a student satisfaction score regarding your teaching in terms of a high number, lots of students agree that they're satisfied with what you're doing. Low number, lots of students are not happy at all with what you're doing, not satisfied at all. And these are quite crude measures because the questions are put quite crudely and the ability for the student to answer is quite limited. And compounding the issue, many students aren't fully engaged in their studies. Often you only have about 20 to 30% of students completing the survey. Some who are completing the survey haven't accessed all of the resources that have been provided to them. Worse still, you get surveys being conducted before the unit ends. That's quite standard, because otherwise students won't come back and complete them. So it's kind of like reviewing a film halfway through. So they indicate how satisfied they are with their teaching on the unit before the teaching is finished. So they may be complaining they can't solve a puzzle before they've been given all of the clues to solve the puzzle. So there's a lot to unpack. I've also had students who, in the old days, when anonymity wasn't as protected as it is now, I had students who I know evaluated lectures that they never saw and never attended. Anyway, let's get it. That's, yeah. Anyway, there's a lot to unpack. Lots to unpack about student satisfaction surveys. It deserves its own video. And if you want that video, let me know. But I mention it here because I think it's played a role in my YouTube videos getting me into a bit of trouble. So let's move to part 8, where I'll reveal to you what that trouble might have been. Okay, let me know how you felt about this video. Was it what you expected? And if you stuck with me this far, hopefully you'll stick with me for part 8, the final part. And I am slowly relocating to a different part of the country, so things are disappearing behind me, and there might be less here. I don't know, maybe I'll try and do it straight away, do it now. Anyway, enough of that. I should let you go. Thanks for watching, and till next time. Ta-da.